This podcast does not provide medical nor legal advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
Hello, possums, and welcome to Everyone Dies, the podcast where we talk about serious illness, dying, death, and bereavement. I'm Marianne Matzo, a nurse practitioner, and I use my experience from working as a nurse for 45 years to help answer your questions about what happens at the end of life.
And I'm Charlie Navarrete, an actor in New York City, and here to offer an every-person viewpoint to our podcast. We are both here because we believe that the more you know, the better prepared you are to make difficult decisions.
So please relax, get yourself something to eat and drink, and thank you for spending the next hour with Charlie and me for our discussion about preserving your loved one's tattoos after their death. In the first half, Charlie is chatting about Tony Bennett's death and has our recipe of the week. In the second and third half, I have an interview with Kyle Sherwood, a third-generation embalmer and funeral director who pioneered the science to preserve a loved one's tattoo after their death. Charlie, do you have tattoos? Have I ever asked you that?
You know what? It was by accident. It was so down in the East Village with a bunch of friends, and no. I almost did once, but no. My father had a great tattoo.
Oh, I remember you telling me about that. So you're going to appreciate the second half then.
I am curious about this, how one preserves a tattoo.
Yeah, I'm so excited to tell you.
Good. No, I look forward to hearing that. I've never imagined that other than some science fiction cryogenic sort of thingy.
I have a small tattoo on my ankle that is easily covered by a sock. And and my girls.
Oh, you rebel!
I was going to a talk once, and my girls wanted to see what I was wearing, make sure my shoes matched, everything. And my oldest said, that tattoo is just really not very professional. And she was like, 10. And I said, thank you. Thank you for that opinion,
They've
Rosie.
only improved with age, yes.
Yeah. So, Tony Bennett died, Charlie.
I know.
Have you ever seen him in concert?
No. And as usual, his last two concerts were with Lady Gaga at the Radio City Music Hall. I don't know what I was doing that. Yeah, because it was announced well in advance. Tickets are going on sale whatever day. And I thought, yes, I will get those. And of course, I waited too long. And what I mean by too long, I think they sold out.
5 minutes.
Yeah, something like that, Marianne. It was, and Radio City has, approximately 6,500 seats. And this bad boy sold out. So they immediately added a second. And of course, I wasn't paying attention. And when I finally paid attention, that was gone too. So to answer your question, no.
Starting in my 20s, because I think I probably have an old soul, I had this thing that whenever anybody who was of the day, meaning, in the 40s came to town, I would, or even older than that, I would get tickets. So I saw Cab Calloway. I saw, I want to say Sarah Vaughan. I saw Carol Channing do Hello, Dolly in Boston.
Okay.
And in 2000, maybe 11, I saw Tony Bennett.
Really? Where at?
And it was down at one of the casinos here in Oklahoma. I forget the name of it. And it was a small venue. I mean, he was close.
Yes.
We were, he was right there. But he was aging, and he'd had a stand-up microphone, and every now and then he would twirl around. And the gerontologist in me was like, Tony, please stop that. Because, your brain in the first place has trouble adjusting to that. Plus, you can lose your balance, you're going to fall. I really, truly wanted to say, Tony, please stop. Please stop. And I've seen, I'd see him on TV, after that, and he would do that same thing, that twirl. I'd be like, oh my God, you're going to fall. So I did get to see Tony. I was very, very pleased with that. But you have a report about Tony Bennett, don't you?
Yes, and not to take, we kind of got hit by a double whammy. The death of Pee Wee Herman, Paul Rubens.
Oh yes, yep. Right up there with Tony Bennett. Yeah.
Yes, I know. You blinked, and it's like, and it's funny when Pee Wee died. I saw a few clips of him, just like in interviews and at Comic-Con, and even without the Pee Wee Herman persona, Paul Rubens, what a funny man! Just, telling stories and everything. Hanging out with David Bowie. Did make some good
choices all the time, right? Though,
yeah.
And for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, just Google Paul Rubin bad choices. It'll come up.
But and then when you see his character Pee Wee Herman, please imagine him with David Bowie. And Bowie asked him to open for him a couple of times. And Pee Wee said, "No, thank you." And he said it's one of the few regrets in his life that he did not open for David Bowie.
I would regret that.
Yeah. So there's Pee Wee, but then there's Tony Bennett. So Tony Bennett started out as a singing waiter in Queens, New York, and continued his singing career until 2021 with 2 final concerts with singer Lady Gaga at Radio City Music Hall. In between, he had an incredible music career. He was a painter of some renown and had many of his pieces displayed in museums. Years after serving in World War II, Mr. Bennett, a supporter of civil rights long before it was fashionable, participated in the Selma to Montgomery Civil Rights March in 1965, and along with Harry Belafonte, Sammy Davis Jr., and others, performed for the Stars for Freedom rally on the outskirts of Montgomery on March 24th, the night before Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered the address that came to be known as the How Long, Not Long speech. At the conclusion of the march, Viola Luiso, a volunteer from Michigan, drove Mr. Bennett to the airport. And then she was murdered later that day by members of the Ku Klux Klan.
Oh my God, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh.
In 2016, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. But despite the disease, he continued to perform and record albums. Correspondent Anderson Cooper, spending time with Bennett, observed that if you met one person with Alzheimer's, you've not met all people with Alzheimer's. To that end, Lady Gaga found that the way to communicate was to keep questions simple. A yes-no question such as, Tony, do you want to sing Love for Sale? Rather than, Tony, what song do you want to sing? She added that when the music comes on, snap. Something happens and he knows exactly what he is doing. His last 2 albums were recorded with Gaga, who we met in 2011. They became very close friends. In fact, he drew the tattoo she has on her right arm. She wanted a remembrance of their time together. So he sketched Miles Davis's trumpet and his last name, Benedetto, tattooed under it. Mr. Bennett died in July 2023 at age 96. Lady Gaga paid tribute to her friend after his death with these words, I will miss my friend forever. I will miss singing with him, recording with him, talking with him, being on stage together. With Tony, I got to live my life in a time warp. Tony and I had this magical power. We transported ourselves to another era. modernized the music together, and gave it all new life as a singing duo. He also showed me how to keep my spirits high and my head screwed on straight. Straight ahead, he'd say. He was an optimist. He believed in quality work and quality life. Plus, there was gratitude. Tony was always grateful. There were 5 decades between us. He was my friend, my real true friend. Our age difference didn't matter. In fact, it gave us each something neither of us had with most people. We were from 2 different stages in life entirely. Inspired. Losing Tony to Alzheimer's has been painful, but it was also really beautiful. An era of memory loss is such a sacred time in a person's life. There's such a feeling of vulnerability and a desire to preserve dignity. All I wanted was for Tony to remember how much I loved him and how grateful I was to have him in my life. I've been grieving the loss of Tony for a long time. We had a very long and powerful goodbye. Don't discount your elders. Don't leave them behind when things change. Don't flinch when you feel sad. Just keep going straight ahead. Sadness is part of it. Take care of your elders, and I promise you will learn something special, maybe even magical. And pay attention to silence. Some of my musical partner and I's most meaningful exchanges were with no melody at all. And that was from Lady Gaga. So Tony Bennett, his last show was titled One Last Time. By some estimates, he sold more than 60 million albums. He sang jazz and standards with the greatest singers and players in the world. Frank Sinatra said many times that Tony Bennett was his favorite singer. Since Mr. Bennett was best known for his song, I Left My Heart in San Francisco, our recipe of the week is homemade rice-a-roni. That's San Francisco treat.
San Francisco
there
treat.
We are. It will make a great side dish for your next funeral lunch.
Oh, I really like Tony Bennett. I mean, not that I knew him, but, and we also have a clip. Charlie sent me a clip of Tony Bennett doing Saturday Night Live, and he was so freaking adorable. Wasn't he in that?
Yeah.
You'll have look in the show notes and watch that. That is so cute.
Yeah, it's very funny. All right. Well, please go to our webpage for this week's recipe of rice-a-roni. Well, hang on. Let me correct that. Homemade rice-a-roni.
There's a difference.
Yes. And additional resources for this program. Your tax-deductible donations are always welcome so that we can continue to offer you quality program. And thank you in advance for making your donation at www.everyonedies.org. That's every, the number 1, dies.org. Marianne?
Thanks, Charlie, and rest in peace, Mr. Bennett. So tattoos have been a mainstream and often seen as art and a way of self-expression. 26% of Americans have more than one tattoo, and 17% have several tattoos. Millennials have the highest share of tattoos in comparison to any other generation. 41% of millennials have one or more tattoos compared to 32% of Gen X and 13% of baby boomers. When we die, our tattoo art is disposed with our remains. Until now. We're pleased to have an interview with Kyle Sherwood, who, along with his father Mike, has pioneered a modern method of tattoo preservation. Tattoos have different meanings across different cultures, from sacred art to the mark of criminals. For example, in Japan, tattoos are part of a wider subculture called irizumi, associated with criminality and considered to be both shocking and taboo with its own unique images and motifs. The most detailed irizumi designs are found in bodysuits, which are often associated with the Yakuza, who are members of a transnational organized crime syndicate. Historians trace the rise of tattoo preservation to the mid to late 19th century, and Fukushi Masashi a Japanese physician, is credited as one of the pioneers in the field. He was born in 1878, and he was fascinated by Irizumi and started a museum to display Irizumi pelts for his scientific research. At the height of his research, Masashi collected 2,000 tattooed human pelts and documented them with over 3,000 photos. However, much of his collection was lost during air raid bombings in 1945. Despite the losses, at least 105 pieces remained intact, and Masashi set up a display in the Medical Pathology Museum of Tokyo University. This collection isn't available to be viewed by the public. References to learn more about the history of tattoos and tattoo preservations are all in our show notes. But there's only one place in the world that offers tattoo preservation after death, and that is Save My Ink Forever. And we had that interview with Kyle, who is Save My Ink Forever. Now, funeral laws in 49 states, the exception being Washington, allow tattoo preservation practice. So let's have a listen to my chat with Kyle Sherwood of Save My Ink Forever. Hi, and I want to welcome our guest, Kyle Sherwood. Thanks, Kyle, for joining us.
Absolutely, my honor.
So Kyle's a third-generation embalmer and funeral director in Ohio, and he and his dad, Mike, got, at least the way that I understand it, Kyle, you're going to tell me more, started this Save My Ink Forever program. And so I'm really curious about, how did this conversation come up with your dad? Like, you eating Thanksgiving dinner and you say, you know what, we should really preserve people's tattoos. How did that come about, Kyle?
Well, so it started off with a few drinks because, no good story starts off with, so I had a salad. But we have we've got a wide variety of friends, and, naturally being, the morticians, any of our friends that have, any death related questions would come to us. And so he had a buddy of his that wanted his tattoo preserved, and, we were kind of, he wanted it done. And so he's like, hey, can you guys do this? And we started kind of doing our research, looking into it, looking at numbers, and trends within the funeral industry. And that's kind of what got the ball rolling, so to speak. And so basically, once we figured out that, this is something that we wanted to do, we started getting into, okay, so how do we do this? And the best kind of idea that we could come up with is that we would offer to pay for people's tummy tucks. And so,
are you still doing that? Because I could really, help you out.
We get that question to this day. No, we're not still offering it, unfortunately. But what we would have people do is we would have them get, 5 or 6 tattoos on the area that was going to have the tummy tuck performed. And then after the tummy tuck was done, that skin was donated to us in exchange for, the tummy tuck. So those kind of became our trial and error tattoos, so to speak. It was about a 2-year process, but that's how we eventually came up with, our proprietary process that we use today.
Wow. Now, what year was this, Kyle? When did you start this?
Well, we started officially, doing commercial or public tattoo preservation in 2016. So we actually started this in 2014, trying to figure it out.
Wow. So I'm a nurse practitioner, as you know, and I'm kind of curious with the science of it. So I know that people who want to have this done, that you send a kit to the funeral home, and that they kind of follow your procedure. And so they literally just cut off the skin around the tattoo and put it in something? How does that go?
Yeah, so the skin is excised using a scalpel, and we're only after the dermis or the skin itself. So it's a fairly superficial excision. You know, we're not going into the adipose tissue or the fat layer for, you know, those that would like layman terms. So we're not going into the fat layer. We're not going into the muscle. We're just after the actual dermis itself. And the tattoos are placed into our kit, which has a dry preservative powder in it. And then that kit is shipped back to us in Ohio, where the actual preservation and framing takes place.
Okay. And how much does this cost?
Well, so pricing is based on the size of the tattoo. So our packaging pricing, so to speak, starts at $1,699 for a 5-inch by 5-inch tattoo and below. And then it goes up roughly $100 per inch. But that would include everything. So that includes any domestic shipping, so to, from, and back to the family or funeral home. It includes, of course, the excision, the preservation, and the archival framing. So everything, when I say archival framing, is done up to museum standards. So UV protective glass, so forth, sealed. And the whole process takes roughly 3 to 3.5 months to complete. We do give out kind of custom pricing for large pieces. When I say large pieces, I mean, you know, full sleeves, full back pieces, full front pieces, leg sleeves, things of that nature. But yeah, it's about, again, a 3.5 month process.
Now, do you have, excuse me if my mind's going off in a weird place, but so when you're talking about, do you have like framers are actual framers who do this, or do you guys do that yourself?
Oh, yeah. No, we have actual framer on staff that handles everything. So everything is professionally done.
Wow.
You know, we maintain things up to the highest standards we possibly can, because again, at the end of the day, we are still not only dealing with art, but we are dealing with someone's loved one. And, you know, these tattoos have significant meaning. And that's why we put an emphasis on, you know, the quality of framing that we use. I mean, sure, we could do framing a lot cheaper, but we don't want to kind of hinder the quality that we're putting out there, because again, we do everything in the utmost respectful and dignified manner that we possibly can, because at the end of the day, at the roots of all of this, you know, we still are in the service profession of, you know, being funeral directors. So we understand the care and compassion that needs to go into this.
So are you guys like the only company like in the world that does this? Or are there other people that do this kind of stuff?
Yeah, we are the only company in the world that does this. Granted, we're not the first people to do this. You know, it was done like pirates. Their tattoos were saved in the case of, you know, shipwreck at sea. Families were able to identify the person by their tattoo. Of course, the famous Japanese doctor that did a lot of the Yakuza work, where those tattoos are currently displayed in museums. So again, we're not the first to do this, but we are the first people to offer it on a commercial scale, as well as bringing it to the Western civilization, so to speak.
Wow. Aren't you so proud of yourself?
Not really. I mean,
really?
I'm pretty humbled
so impressed
by,
that you know, like it's yours.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty humbled by nature in the sense that, like, I don't, you know, see it as a big deal, just because, you know, it is what it is. Where I get more gratification out of the fact of knowing that we're helping these families with their grief, and the meaning that them having these pieces mean to them. We hear stories all the time, in the sense of, a family said to us, I just couldn't imagine getting an urn back and the funeral director telling me this is my son. Whereas with this tattoo, it was a piece that I saw on him every day. He wore it proudly. And now I feel like I have a piece of him with me. I feel like he's home. And my point to that is kind of like, some people say, well, why would they want the tattoo? It's a comfort level to them because it was a part of them. It was, right. Again, something that represented them. I mean, it's no different in our mind than, why do people keep keepsake urns? Because they have a piece of that person with them. So it's the same concept. It's just, sometimes people have the knee-jerk reaction of, oh my God, skin on wall. But we would challenge that with some of our pieces. You wouldn't walk by our tattoo displayed with other photos and be like, oh my God, that's skin. You wouldn't necessarily know it. And that was, part of our proprietary process where, we wanted the skin to almost end up looking more like parchment versus, actual skin.
Ah, I see. I was looking at some of the pictures that you have in some of the interviews and on Facebook, and they are incredible work.
Yeah, we appreciate that, but that's kind of where we looked at and we saw, okay, we're getting two very drastic different types of tattoos. You get the tattoos that are really good. I mean, some of these tattoos today are modern day Michelangelos and Picassos. We just don't feel that they get some of the credit that they deserve because their tattoos are done with ink and skin versus ink and parchment. Mm-hmm. So the quality that they're able to do today is, bar none. They're raising the level of what they're able to do, and it's insanely beautiful pieces. So from that standpoint, you have, the preservation of the artwork itself, and for the first time in history, the tattoo artist's legacy as an artist is able to live on through their canvas, whereas before, they were cremating their work or burying it, and you wouldn't burn or bury a Picasso, and that's what we're trying to save. Now, on the other hand, the other aspect you have these tattoos that are meaningful. We've got some tattoos where we're like, oh man, this isn't a real good tattoo, but that doesn't take away or give any less justification to the meaning that this tattoo had to the person or the family. Right. We like to say that tattoos tell a story, and one of the joys that I get is hearing some of the stories behind these tattoos and what they meant to that person. And you can hear the family's voice change, from heavy grief to, maybe a little bit more perky or excited because they're getting to share the story of their loved one with you.
Right. Well, I can, my dad was in World War II, and he came home with like a Cupid doll on his bicep. And my sisters were, one of them was born while he was in the war. And he would tell each of the girls that, the name of the Cupid doll was their name. And he would pop his muscle and make it dance. And then I came along many years later, and then the Cupid doll was named Marianne, and he'd pop his muscle and make it dance. And it was just this green, very primitive kind of World War II tattoo. But
exactly.
I think about that, and I think, nobody ever took a picture of it. No, unless, you kind of zoomed in on something that, that happened to catch it. But I don't think we have any pictures of that. And it's sort of just our memory is what we're left with.
Right. And so that is kind of why we're doing this. And that's an exact perfect example of, it may not be a great tattoo, but that story that you just told is priceless. And so that's why some people want to save that tattoo, because they look at that tattoo and they're continuously reminded of that story.
Mm-hmm. And the lies he told his daughters. So do you have a tattoo?
Oh, yeah.
So do you think you would want it preserved like this?
Yeah, I mean, I know I've got one that specifically, and again, it goes back to the kind of the story behind it. But I have 3 trocars on my leg, which for those that don't know, a trocar is an embalming instrument. And me being a 3rd generation, my grandfather, my dad, and I have all used the same trocar. So wow. I have the 3 trocars. Right, I have the 3 trocars with each of our initials. So that's kind of like a morbid family crest, so to speak. But I know that. But probably to me, my most meaningful tattoo that I have is right now, until I get something, dedicated to my 2 daughters. But right now is a chest piece that I have, which is 2 angels and a stairway to heaven. And basically that was my kind of tribute to when I was 2.5 years old. I was diagnosed with cancer, and I was given an 8-week prognosis. So I got like my wish and everything granted through Make-A-Wish Foundation, which, any 2.5-year-old, it's go to Disney World, which, which I did. But so for me, that tattoo kind of represents my, personal journey with cancer, and how a lot of kids that I was in the hospital with, didn't make it. And I was, fortunate enough to still be here. But so, yeah, that's kind of, and I've got several other tattoos, but, those tattoos are certainly ones that I could see being saved, based on the meaning of them.
Right. Wow. What a story, huh? My thought is, I'm so glad you survived to, help people in the way that you're helping them, and helping them with their grief and their bereavement.
It's kind of come full circle in some sense.
You can be humble, Kyle, but I'll sing your praises for you, because I think it's really a gift that you're giving to people.
Well, I appreciate that greatly.
Do you have, before we wrap up, any story that you can tell about either, a retrieval or a tattoo, or I know, there may not be, but are there any?
Yeah, I mean, we've got, tons of stories, but like we've got over the top stories with the Chris Wenzel full body tattoo preservation that we did in Canada. But a simple story, and one of my favorites is we had a gentleman that passed away that had 2 daughters, and he had 2 heart tattoos. They were connected hearts, and each heart had one of his daughter's names in them. Mm-hmm. Well, so the daughters naturally both wanted the tattoo that dad had on them that has their name on them, which obviously you can't give one tattoo to 2 people. So we came up with kind of a creative idea where we actually kind of cut the heart tattoo in such a way that each daughter was able to get their portion of the heart with their names on it. And it kind of brought me back to like the middle school days that I had, where, the girls would wear the best friend heart necklaces, where the pieces could come together and form a perfect necklace again. And that's kind of what we did. So we were able to embody that, and each daughter got their portion of the tattoo. And, you know, if they ever put them together, they would form that one tattoo all over again. So, you know, just kind of little things like that, that keep us going. You know, and obviously this isn't something that's for everyone, and we recognize that. You know, you either love it or you hate it. It's not for everyone. But what keeps us going, again, is the gratification that these families have for what we're doing. And just kind of side note, something important to mention, because, again, we do everything with most dignity and respect. You know, there's certain tattoos that we won't preserve. For example, we wouldn't do a full face preservation, no genital preservation, and obviously anything that propagates, you know, hate speech or things in that, you know, the kind of delicate nature of certain tattoos. So we do use discretion in our choices of tattoo preservation.
Now, excuse me if this is weird, but if it were a genital tattoo, how would in the frame, in the picture, how would you even know that that's what it was?
Well, no, the reason why I'm saying that specifically is because we've had people, you know, reach out to us wanting the whole kit and caboodle, so to speak, which, yeah. Which we won't do for obvious reasons.
Okay, you see where my mind was going. It was like,
that okay maybe, but the other reference, no, we won't do.
Yeah, okay, I gotcha. See, you know,
because we would do.
I'm a good Catholic girl from Detroit. I wouldn't even.
Right. Yeah, because we would do a face tattoo, but that's why I'm trying to explain. We wouldn't do a full face where, obviously, once it's framed, it is and we have a tattoo convention coming up in October, where we're going to be revealing a piece of work, and the way that we preserved it has never been done or seen before. We have a half sleeve tattoo preservation that instead of it being flat in a frame, the family wanted it done as a 3D rendering. So we excised the half sleeve in one piece, and we have it formed as an arm that's going to be underneath a acrylic glass box that is going to rotate 360 degrees. So it'll look like one of those kind of museum cases that you see. So we're pretty excited about that.
Wow, that sounds great. Have you seen that? Yeah. We did a podcast about memorial tattoos, and in there we talked about there's a way that you can get cremains really finely processed so that they can go in this special ink. Have you seen that?
Yeah, actually, funny thing. So, number one, our framer actually had that done. Unfortunately, her son passed away, and so she had his ashes put into the ink and made a tattoo. And then I had a funeral director reach out to us and said, "Hey, you know, I don't have a tattoo, but I figured you might know, is there a company out there that will put cremains into tattoo ink?" So I pointed her into the direction of that company. So I've seen it personally done, and I've also, you know, pointed someone in the right direction to have that done. So yes, I am familiar with it. I think it's pretty cool.
I thought that was really fascinating to have that done. So you could almost have.
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah, multiple. You can have multiple generations within a tattoo, and and we've gotten tattoos like that. We've got one that is a fishing rod that a gentleman got that says, Papa Eddie on it in dedication to his grandfather. And his uncle actually did the tattoo. And unfortunately for this gentleman's mother, her son passed away, her brother passed away, and her father passed away. So within that tattoo, she has 3 generations of, family members.
I think I saw that in the Times article, right? Is that where that was?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So for those that are listening, look at our show notes, and you can see what that tattoo looks like. Yeah, that was pretty impressive. Well, Kyle, any final thoughts that you want to tell our listeners before we say thank you to you?
Yeah. So, again, thanks for taking your time out of your day to listen to me ramble about my business. But, hopefully nobody will need our services in the near future. But, thanks for the support. And, if you don't like what we're doing, too bad.
Spoken like a true Midwesterner.
Yeah, I have thick skin, no pun intended. It doesn't bother me because, again, the gratification that we do get from the families is what makes it all worth it. So we'll take it as it comes.
Well, everyone does. Our point is education, knowing what all the options are, letting you know all kinds of things that you wouldn't normally know, but give you those options. And this is like another one of those, right?
Right, because exactly. And people aren't supposed to have to go through these arrangements often. And so educating yourself and knowing what is out there and creating that meaningful memorial, the celebration of your loved one's life, so to speak, is very important, and it is meaningful. And, it's definitely, the more you know, the better. I can't say the easier because, it's a tough process, but, the more you know, the more you're able to, honor your loved one. And that's what it's about.
And if you find out about it later and you say, oh my God, I would have loved to have done that.
Yep, that's happened. Right? We've had people reach out to us, say, oh my God, I wish I would have known about you guys 3 years ago because I would have loved to have had this done. And so now we're just working on, letting people know that this is an option and, that you can get this done for your loved one.
Well, we'll help you with that. And I want to thank Kyle Sherwood and his dad, Mike, who's, I guess, semi-retired and at the pool right now.
Yeah, he's golfing right now.
Okay. And they're from Save My Ink Forever, and all of the contact information we're going to put in our show notes. So if this is something that appeals to you, please get in touch with Kyle, and he'll take care of you. Thank you, Kyle, for talking to us today. We
Absolutely.
Really
My honor. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
And one of the things that Kyle told me after our interview was that he's never yet had a really, kind of famous person who has died and the family wanted to preserve the tattoo. So I'm thinking, shout out to Lady Gaga. Think about this. Wouldn't it be great to preserve that piece of Tony Bennett art for family or for a museum after your death? So call me, Lady Gaga. We'll set you up. There are many ways to express our grief, honor our dead, and grieve their death. Toko-Pa Turner, in her book Belonging, says that grief is the response to a broken bond of belonging. Whether through the loss of a loved one, a way of life, or a cherished community, grief is the reaction to being torn from what you love. In Titsajuli language, the words for grief and praise are the same because you can only grieve what you have dearly loved. We grieve the loves we lost. We grieve our abilities vanishing through illness or age. We grieve the loss of faith in our religion. We grieve for our children leaving home. We grieve the paths we didn't walk. We grieve the family we never had. We grieve the suffering of the planet. But while grief may look like an expression of pain that serves no purpose, it is the soul's acknowledgement of what we value. Grief is the honor we pay for that which is dear to us, and it is only through the connection to which we cherish that we know how to move forward. In this way, grief is motion. And through your grief, you may decide that that piece of tattoo art on a loved one is something that you want to preserve. That's something that you want to keep. And now you have a way to do that. All of the contact and social media information for Save My Ink is in our show notes, and I hope you'll take a look at it. What do you think of that, Charlie?
First, I did not know there were there were rules about tattoos. What did you say there did you say like in 48 states, or what did you say that there?
That the funeral laws in 49 states allow preservation practices. There's only one state, which is Washington, that does not. And this really kind of issues that people have with tattoo preservation really kind of go to Nazi Germany and the horrors that were done to people.
Right, of course.
In terms of,
tattooing
things that were done.
Yeah.
Well, and plus, taking off their skin and all the medical kind of things, quote unquote, medical kinds of things that they did. But, there's a big difference here in that in Nazi Germany, those things were done to people without their consent and without their request of the people. And this is different. This is something that someone says, I want my family to have this. Mm-hmm. And so they give their consent while they're still alive. The procedure that, Kyle just told us about is very simple. They only take the dermis, which is that just very outer part of your skin. Yeah. And when it dries and it's preserved, that the little bit of skin that you do see is sort of like parchment paper. Like if you looked at it, you wouldn't really say, oh, that's someone's skin. You see the art. And that's the other part of Kyle's view is that there are some really famous tattoo artists. And if that art is buried, it'll be like burying, a Monet or, a famous work of art. Like you wouldn't just dig a hole and put that in. You would preserve it in some way. Yeah. And that's the other piece of this is that there are tattoo artists that are incredible artists. So that's another piece of it. But none of it is ever done without the person's consent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Wow. Okay. That's it for this week's episode. Please stay tuned for the continuing saga of Everyone Dies. And thank you for listening. This is Charlie Navarrete. And circling back to music, from the closing refrain of the musical Cabaret, start by admitting, from cradle to tomb isn't that long a stay.
Life is a cabaret, old chum. And I'm Marianne Matzo, and I'll see you next week. Well, we'll both see you next week. Mm-hmm. Remember, every day is a gift.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.